Well, it's about time I reviewed a game that I've played for a while. It's not too old, so ladies and gentlemen, this is my review of Crash Nitro Kart for the Sony PlayStation 2 and the Nintendo Game Boy Advance. Since I'm tackling two versions of the same game, I will try to display the differences and similarities as I go along. Anyway, I digress. Let's get started. Let's start with a plot summary. Also to mention, this plot is exactly the same in both the GBA and PS2 versions of this game. The only difference is that the PS2 version has fully rendered animated clips, while the GBA version has text boxes and pictures of the cutscenes from the PS2 versions, only in lower quality. Some lines and pictures from scenes in the PS2 version have also been left out of the GBA version, like Geary's personality change from destroy all humans to clean up everything, and some others. Anyway, more on the story. On Earth, Crash Bandicoot is sleeping and his friends Coco, Crunch, and Aku Aku are relaxing, tuning up their karts, while their nemesis, Dr. Neo Cortex, ponders his next course of action in regards to defeating the Bandicoots and achieve world domination. Suddenly, both groups are abducted by a mysterious white light that takes them to a large coliseum somewhere in another galaxy. This galaxy is ruled by Emperor Velo the 27th, who plans on having the group race for the entertainment of his subjects. He promises the Earthlings that winning the races will win their freedom and threatens them with the destruction of Earth if they refuse to race. After both teams accept the challenge, Velo explains that the racers will compete on 4 worlds of his choosing and promises a race against the galactic champion if the champions of those worlds are defeated. The worlds he chooses are in this order: Terra, Baron, Phenomena, and Techni. The world champions or bosses of this game consist of the following: Krunk, a hulking creature who feels that Earth is a copy of his home planet Terra and races to prove which planet is superior. Nash, Baron's champion, a genetically engineered shark-like creature who was created to always move. Norm, Phenomena's champion, a goblin-like mime who races alongside a larger and more obnoxious version of himself. And Geary, Techni's champion, a robot as much obsessed with perfection as he is with cleaning. When the champions of Terra, Baron, Phenomena, and Techni are defeated, the Earth racers go up against the Galactic Champion, who turns out to be Emperor Velo himself. The racers defeat Velo, but he refuses to send the racers back to Earth. When the Earth racers angrily demand a rematch, Velo readily accepts, on the condition that the Earth racers must first collect all his time relics. Velo loses again to the Earth racers and literally explodes in a bout of fury, revealing himself to be a robot suit controlled by a small gremlin-like creature of himself. The events after the second Velo challenge and ending are determined by which of the characters the player used to win the race. If Crash, Coco, or Crunch wins the race, Velo, having lost his influence over his subjects, dejectedly relinquishes his empire to the Bandicoots. Crash considers becoming the next emperor of the galaxy, but decides otherwise and gives control back to Velo in exchange for sending the Bandicoots back to Earth. If Cortex, Engine, or Tiny win the race, Velo struggles with Cortex over the possession of his scepter, only to be stopped by Tiny. Cortex uses the scepter's power in an attempt to return to Earth, but the scepter breaks and sends Cortex, Engine, and Tiny to Terra instead, where they are confronted by the natives, which all resemble Krunk for some reason. Tiny repairs the scepter and is subsequently referred as a king, much to Cortex's annoyance. Well, that pretty much sums up the whole story mode, but Crash Nitro Kart hasn't got just a story behind it. Oh no. It has also got some single and multiplayer modes as well, like the go-kart racing prequel before this for the PS1, Crash Team Racing. In fact, this technically is a direct sequel to CTR, and in my opinion, it does a great job as a sequel. Let's talk more about single player for now, and multiplayer I will explain later on. Single player can be summed up as
Cup Tournament Racing, which lets you race on 3 tracks and placing you on overall highest score. Quick Race, which is pretty much the same as the Team Race mode, but you can't use the Team Up ability from the Adventure mode in Quick Race, and also lap and race time trials, which is pretty self-explanatory. For multiplayer, however, you can team up and race each other, verse each other in racing, or this version's battle mode, and so on. Multiplayer in this game isn't too bad, but can be unbalanced if one player knows all the tricks of the trade and the other hasn't played the game before, whereas battle mode most of the time is all 50-50. Talking about characters, we might as well go through all of them. Crash Nitro Kart features around 27 characters, 16 in which are playable in the PS2 version. The 16 characters are split into 4 teams of 4, which each team driving karts of a matching colour. Team Bandicoot, which pilots blue karts, is led by Crash Bandicoot. His kart is an all-round performer with exceptional acceleration. Coco Bandicoot, Crash's younger sister, programs her kart's wheels to balance their speed better, improving her kart's turning ability. Crunch Bandicoot, who originally was created by Dr. Neo Cortex to destroy Crash, pilots a kart with amazing momentum and speed but low acceleration. Team Cortex, which pilots red karts, is led by Dr. Neo Cortex, Crash's arch nemesis. Like Crash, Cortex pilots a kart that excels in acceleration. Dr. Engine, Dr. Cortex's right-hand man, is a mechanical genius who pilots a kart that specializes in turning ability. Tiny Tiger, Dr. Cortex's most faithful henchman, is a hulking giant who pilots a kart with a top speed like Crunch. Team Oxide, which pilots yellow karts, is led by main antagonist of CTR, Nitrous Oxide. His henchmen Zam and Zem become accessible as playable characters if the player wins the purple and green gem cups in adventure mode respectively. Team Trance, which pilots green karts, is led by Entrance, the egg-like master of hypnotism. Dingle and Polar, whom Entrance has hypnotized, becomes accessible as playable characters if the player wins the red and blue gem cups in the adventure mode respectively. Now for the unlockable characters. For Team Bandicoot, Fake Crash, an imperfect duplicate of Crash, becomes accessible as a playable character if player performs 50 consecutive speed boosts on any track in adventure mode as a member of Team Cortex. For Team Cortex, or Team Evil, Dr. Nefarious Tropy, or Entropy, the self-proclaimed Master of Time, becomes accessible as a playable character if the player beats all the time records in race time trial mode twice. One for the normal time, and then one for Entropy's time. For Team Trance, Pura, whom Entrance has also hypnotized, becomes accessible as a playable character if the player performs 50 consecutive speed boosts on any track in adventure mode as a member of Team Bandicoot. And for Team Oxide, Real Velo, the form Emperor Velo is seen at the end of adventure mode, the second Velo race, becomes accessible as a playable character if the player wins the adventure mode twice. One as a member of Team Bandicoot and once as a member of Team Cortex. The GBA version, on the other hand, is good character-wise because you were able to use the bosses from the adventure in all other modes of the game after you unlocked them. In the PS2, that didn't happen at all, which is a little bit of a letdown, but when you think about it, there are also some other things that are different in the GBA version. Like when playing adventure mode, there is no other racer from their own team, which means if you are playing as Crunch Bandicoot, it will result in no AI of Crash or Coco going up against you in the race, unlike the PS2 version where 2 members of each team compete to see who is the best team. After the player also has both the CNK token and relic
at one track in the information, the map will become unplayable. Geary's obsession with cleaning is not shown in the handheld version. Velo's real form is also not revealed either. Spyro the Dragon, another playable character, replaces Pyrrha in the advanced version. Velo's robotic form in the GBA version is riding his champion kart, while in the PS2 version he uses the Team Oxide kart, which I explained briefly a bit earlier. Also in this version, the player is able to throw power shield item at enemies, like in Crash Team Racing, and that both the bowling bomb and power shields are able to home in on enemies like the homing missiles do. Also, for some reason, Dingle and Polar are available at the start, but Nitrous Oxide is still unlockable in the GBA version. Now, since I've finished talking about the plot and the playable characters, let's talk about the gameplay. For the PS2 version, you control your kart with the left analog stick, accelerate with the X button, brake with the circle button, drift, or power sliders as it's called in this game, with the L or R1 buttons. For the GBA, you also control your kart with the D-pad, but considering the limit on buttons we have on the GBA, you accelerate with the A button, brake with the B button, drift only with the R button, and use items with the L button. You can also change the map on the lower right hand corner to your speedo and vice versa with the select button, which is cool, and you can pause your current game with the start button. The controls in both games for the most part are pretty good. The only gripes that I do have with the controls is that they can be a bit stiff, especially while turning normally, when you aren't drifting, because basically it becomes a fucking tank. And this doesn't happen at all in the GBA version. So it only really happens in the PS2 version. For the most part, the story was pretty good for a Crash Bandicoot game. The only thing that I hope they did was put some animated cutscenes in the GBA version, because the amount of text boxes and cutscene still frames are a bit too excessive in my opinion. So overall, this game is a pretty good racing game. It's pretty fun no matter if you're playing by yourself or with friends. The story was really fleshed out, the characters are as good as ever, and seems to be a good sequel to CTR. There are only a couple of gripes that make it not perfect, but that kinda happens. I only hope that Crash Bandicoot games would be made by someone other than Activision. Not that they are a bad company, no way. It's just that the Crash Bandicoot games got worse and worse after the release of Crash of the Titans. Fuck that game. Sorry. I do hope that Naughty Dog get the rights for Crash back and make some great games again with the Bandicoot. One day, but as for now, he's mostly deemed to be dead at this point. The scores that I'll give for these two games, I will give their own separate scores, because they are technically two different games. So, for the PS2 version, I'll give it a 6 out of 10, and the GBA one gets a 7 out of 10. It gets a better score because of the sheer amount of more characters, and the controls are greatly mapped out, considering the limitations on GBA controls. But still is far from the perfect scores because of the over excessive amount of text boxes like I mentioned earlier. Anyway, this is Mario Man, and thanks for watching this review. You guys have a great day or night, and take care.